So many of those guys were innocent of any crimes. And to lose 8, 10, 12 years of your life for nothing is inexcusable. And a real shame is that our government doesn't even issue an apology.
I'm going to meet John Kiriakou, who's a former CIA case officer. He just got out of prison after spending 2 years in federal penitentiary, and he's the only person who's been prosecuted in connection with the CIA's enhanced interrogation program. Not for participating in it, but for revealing classified details about it. In 2007, John Kiriakou became the first CIA officer to reveal that al-Qaeda facilitator Abu Zubaydah was waterboarded, a detail that was then a closely guarded secret. Zubaydah was the CIA's high-value detainee, captured after 9/11, and the guinea pig for the agency's enhanced interrogation program. He's been held captive at Guantanamo since 2006.
Waterboarding was one of the techniques, yes.
And was it used on Zubaydah?
It was.
And was it successful?
It was.
The unauthorized disclosure to ABC News turned Kiriakou into a household name overnight, led to a lucrative book deal, and landed him on the government's radar. After he told ABC News that Abu Zubaydah was tortured, Kiriakou revealed another piece of classified information to a journalist, the identity of a covert CIA operative who was involved in the CIA's rendition, detention, and interrogation program. The government prosecuted Kiriakou for the leak, and in 2013, he accepted a plea deal that sent him away to a federal penitentiary for 2.5 years. We caught up with Kiriakou at his home in Arlington, Virginia, just a few days after he was released.
Hey,
John.
how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Please come in.
Thank you.
Good to be home? Yeah, it's good to be home. It's frustrating, too, at the same time. You know, I was only gone 23 months, and the readjustment is...
Thank you.
Thank you. It's dramatic. These guys who do 10, 20, 30 years, I don't know how they readjust. And I can see why people don't want to leave prison after a while. In addition to a broken chair that I sit in every day, I've got a job situation where I've got to work 40 hours a week from an approved office or store or business or whatever, not from home.
Okay.
Or I risk going back to prison. And I didn't know that until last night. So I've accepted this terrific job working from home in business development for a medical technology company. And they told me last night, either get an office or quit. And then if I don't get a 40-hour job, I risk going back to prison. I posted this on Twitter this morning. It says, I really need a job. Must be 40 hours and not from home. I don't want the halfway house to send me back to prison just for unemployment. Ideas?
John, you got to admit your resume is a little unorthodox.
My resume is unorthodox.
Former CIA
I'm a trained
case
spy.
Right. Former spy.
Right.
On the Abu Zubaydah capture team.
Right.
Spent 2 years in federal prison.
Yes. Yes.
What skill set are you going to apply in the real world?
I count the current Secretary of State among my former employers. Yeah, and I'm going to end up at a Dunkin' Donuts. So that's the world I'm living in right now.
Esoteric taste in literature?
You know,
My Country Versus Me.
by Wen Ho Lee, I wanted something sympathetic on these long bus rides up to the halfway house.
What was your first day out like?
I was originally told I would spend an hour at the halfway house and then be sent home on house arrest. So my wife and kids and a friend picked me up at prison, and we were going to stop for lunch, but decided not to risk it. We were afraid we didn't have enough time.
First meal when you got out, you did that whole...
You know,
was there something you had been like craving?
Yeah, I was craving Greek food, and we planned it out that we would stop for lunch at a friend's diner here in Arlington. I was going to get a gyro platter, and that just didn't happen. So that night, what did we eat that night? My wife cooked that night, and then the next night we ordered out sushi.
Yeah.
I was dying for
Things
sushi.
you weren't getting in prison.
That's right. Oh, in prison it's an all carb all the time diet.
Right.
Yeah. Like everybody, I put on weight in prison. I actually had a lot of trouble sleeping that first night. You know, it's funny, you get used to this steel slab with a thin mattress on the top, and you get used to the sound of keys jangling all night long as the corrections officers walk through your cell counting people. And it's so quiet here. It's so quiet, and prison is so incredibly loud, in part because it's so incredibly overcrowded.
I mean, this is federal prison.
Yeah.
You're in there with, you know,
Oh, yeah.
some of the worst of the worst.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yeah, this is a common misnomer. This was no Club Fed. This was no, you know, camp with a 3-hole golf course, and this was real prison, honest to God prison, with walls and concertina wire and, you know, the whole thing that you see on MSNBC at 11 o'clock at night.
In terms of survivability, did you like fall back on your training?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
Did you use your CO skills?
In fact, I've written the first draft of a book called Doing Time Like a Spy, How the CIA Taught Me to Survive and Thrive in Prison.
So you wrote this by hand in prison.
Yeah. No access to
Analog.
a computer, no access to even a typewriter. What I did is I relied almost solely on my CIA training. I made strategic alliances, for example, from the minute I got there. And there was some serendipity involved too. I was a little nervous because I wasn't sure, you know, what I should do, where I should go, where I should sit. So I kept to myself the first couple of days, and I allowed people to come up to me. And so I ended up becoming most friendly with the Italians. And I don't mean just people with Italian names, I mean the Italians. And you know, all 5 families were represented there, as well as northern New Jersey and New England. And we hit it off famously. I was in prison about a week when Louis Farrakhan made a very supportive statement. And so that made me good with the Muslims.
So in terms of like the racial politics, that helped you?
It helped me greatly. Most Muslims in prison are not necessarily religious Muslims. Muslims in prison are more of a gang than a religious group. So that sort of guaranteed, that expression of support from Farrakhan sort of guaranteed no problems for me on that front. Because I was not a rat or a child molester, I was embraced by the Aryans. Went to the Aryan Super Bowl party, went to the Aryan Christmas party, sat at the Aryan table for the first year until I moved in with the Italians. And so, you know, I formed these strategic alliances that really made the time much easier than it otherwise could have been. There's only one group that I actively ostracized and stayed away from, and that was the child molesters. Nobody associates with the child molesters except other child molesters, and I kept away.
The government alleged that Kiriakou was a prolific leaker, disclosing classified information to journalists about the CIA's enhanced interrogation program on numerous occasions between 2007 and 2009. Do you ever just think, like, this is crazy?
Yeah.
Like, I helped capture, like, some of the top suspects in the global war on terror, and now I have to report to a parole officer?
What's crazy to me is what my attorneys initially described to me as selective and vindictive prosecution. That's an actual legal term. And there are supposedly laws to protect people from being the subject of vindictive and selective prosecutions. My attorneys believed, and I believe, that I was a victim of a selective and vindictive prosecution. I think that the Justice Department has been incredibly hypocritical in leak cases. I mean, Washington operates on leaks. And the truth of the matter has turned out to be if it's a supporter of the president leaking, or the leak makes the government look good, you're good to go. If your leak is critical of the government, or the government wants to punish you in some way, then they prosecute you. The last 3 directors of the Central Intelligence Agency have leaked prolifically. And in one case, Leon Panetta, former DCI Leon Panetta, did exactly the same thing I did, where he outed the Navy SEAL that led the bin Laden raid. But he said, "Oh, my bad. It was an accident," and he's free to cash his $6 million book advance. Yeah. While I'm prosecuted and go to prison and lose my pension and everything. Can I offer you guys a cup of coffee?
Sure, that'd be great.
It's decaf. Is that all right?
John, can you talk me through what was happening in Pakistan in 2001 and 2002?
Sure. I was working from headquarters on September 11th, and my God, I wanted to avenge, like everybody, I wanted to avenge the 9/11 attacks. So I volunteered to go overseas. In the days when our official relationship with the Pakistanis was very close. It was very close, very warm, very cooperative. We did a lot of good work together, and I came to really like and respect my Pakistani counterparts. After the fall of Tora Bora, most Al-Qaeda fighters that had been in Afghanistan had fled to Pakistan. So our job was to figure out where they were hiding and to try to capture them. Well, when I first arrived, my boss told me to come up with a plan to take down an Al-Qaeda safe house. Well, I had training, of course, but I had never actually taken down a safe house. I came up with this plan. We had an informant who slipped us an address of a suspected safe house, and just to try it out, we hid it at 2 o'clock in the morning. And we caught some Egyptian Islamic Jihad guy hiding out, and he had escaped from Afghanistan. So we said, hey, we had some success. We tried it again a week later. We caught a couple of Tunisian teenagers who had gone through the training in Afghanistan and had slipped into Pakistan. So this was a workable formula. We got word from Washington that Abu Zubaydah was somewhere in Pakistan, and our job was to catch him. At the time, we thought that Abu Zubaydah was a major Al-Qaeda figure. It turned out he was not. He was never an actual member of Al-Qaeda. He had never pledged fealty to Osama bin Laden. But he was the commander of the 2 training camps. And we hadn't captured any major Al-Qaeda leaders. We had only killed one. We had killed Mohammed Atta in a bombing in Tora Bora. So we went after Abu Zubaydah. We were able to get it down to 14 different sites. The day before the actual operation, we went to each one of these 14 sites, and just coincidentally, we got to one site that we thought was probably going to be a big deal for us, and my phone rang, and it was the analyst, and he said that Abu Zubaydah had made a mistake in his communications. I probably shouldn't say more than that on that point. And then at 2 a.m., we beat down the door of all 14 places. The Abu Zubaydah house, it turned out, had a steel reinforced door. And so it took quite some time, many minutes, to get through the door. By the time we got through the door, Abu Zubaydah, a Syrian bomber, and Abu Zubaydah's bodyguard had made it to the roof of the house. And they were jumping to the roof of the next house to try to escape. And a Pakistani soldier shot all 3 of them as they came down, or as they jumped, and then they came down after being hit. The Syrian was killed instantly. Abu Zubaydah was gravely wounded. He was shot in the thigh, the groin, and the stomach with an AK-47. And then the bodyguard was shot through the leg. And that's how we got him.
Zubaydah was then whisked away to a CIA black site prison in Thailand, where he became the first high-value detainee subjected to the so-called enhanced interrogation techniques. Your job was to capture.
Yeah, my job was to capture. A plane would invariably fly in from where, I don't know, to where, I don't know. And we would load them on the plane and never see them again. The agency had no training program in interrogation. We had never done interrogations before. And interrogations, we learned the hard way, are something that you just can't wing. You have to be trained. That's why the FBI over the years has been so much more successful. Believe me, I hate complimenting the FBI, but they're really good at what they do. And the CIA wasn't, at least not in 2002. And so they made a lot of mistakes.
I know that you have been an outspoken advocate against torture and the enhanced interrogation techniques even before you went to prison. Now, having actually been incarcerated and been a prisoner yourself, has it changed your perspective at all? Has it deepened your resolve?
It's deepened my resolve, and it's also exposed to me what a problem prison conditions are and how necessary prison reform is in this country. We should be ashamed of ourselves for the state of our prisons. We really need to learn from our European allies how to incarcerate people.
What do you do next? How do you pick up the pieces? You're a felon, right?
Yeah, I'm a convicted felon, so I lost my pension, I can't vote. I'm under the control of the Bureau of Prisons for the next 3 years. I'd like to eventually end up at a think tank. I'd like to write and speak and teach, maybe do some TV news commentary like I did before I was arrested, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time.
Kiriakou's job fears were never borne out. Not long after our interview, the halfway house relented and said he could work for the medical technology company from home. And it doesn't look like he'll have to wait too long to hook up with a think tank. Kiriakou told us he accepted a job as an associate fellow with the Institute of Policy Studies, where he will cover torture, intelligence policy, the Middle East, and prison reform.